Okay, picture this. It's the year 1177 BC, and you're living in what we'd call the height of civilization. We're talking international trade routes, diplomatic letters written in multiple languages, palaces that would make modern architects weep with envy, and a global economy that somehow worked without the internet. Pretty impressive, right? And then, in the span of maybe 50 years, it all just stopped. Like someone hit the reset button on human civilization. Welcome to Mystique History, where today we're diving into one of the most fascinating mysteries in archaeology, the Bronze Age collapse, the year everything went sideways. And at the center of it all, a group so mysterious, so utterly confusing to historians, that we literally just call them the Sea Peoples, because we have no idea who they actually were. Imagine if aliens invaded Earth tomorrow, and historians 3,000 years from now could only describe them as the Sky Guys. That's basically what we're dealing with here. So let's set the scene. The late Bronze Age, around 1200 BC, was like the Marvel Cinematic Universe of the ancient world. Everything was connected. You had the Egyptian Empire in the south, absolute powerhouse, building monuments that still blow our minds today. Up north, the Hittite Empire in what's now Turkey, controlling massive territories and throwing their weight around. Over in Greece, you had the Mycenaeans, the folks who probably inspired all those stories about Achilles and the Trojan War. Cyprus was the tech hub, cranking out copper like it was going out of style. The Levantine coast, places like Ugarit and Byblos, were basically the Hong Kong and Singapore of their day, maritime trading posts where goods from 3 continents changed hands, and everyone was talking to everyone. We found letters between kings addressing each other as brother, arranging marriages, trading gifts, conducting diplomacy. It was cosmopolitan, sophisticated, and apparently fragile as glass. Here's the thing that blows my mind. These civilizations had writing. They had bureaucracies. They kept detailed records about grain shipments, tax collection, diplomatic marriages, you name it. They were obsessed with documentation, and yet when everything collapsed, when this entire interconnected world system just ended, the records don't really tell us why. It's like if our entire modern civilization collapsed and all future archaeologists found were memes and TikTok videos. They'd be so confused. That's kind of what we're dealing with. We have pieces of the puzzle, but the full picture? Still mostly a mystery. Now, before we get into the collapse itself, let me paint you a picture of just how connected this world was. We're talking about a trading network that stretched from Afghanistan to Spain. Tin from Cornwall in Britain was being mixed with copper from Cyprus to make bronze in Egypt. Amber from the Baltic Sea ended up in Mycenaean Greece. There was literally a shipwreck found off the coast of Turkey, the Uluburun wreck, that had cargo from at least 7 different cultures on board. Raw materials, luxury goods, diplomatic gifts, all packed into one ship. That's globalization, Bronze Age style. And it worked because everyone needed everyone else. You can't make bronze with just copper. You need tin. And tin deposits are rare, so you need trade routes, you need stable political relationships, you need everything to keep working together. But then, around 1200 BC, things started getting weird. And by weird, I mean catastrophic. The first clue we have is from the Hittites. They were one of the big superpowers, remember? Well, their capital, Hattusa, shows signs of hasty fortification right before it was abandoned and burned. Someone was scared. The king was writing increasingly desperate letters to neighboring states asking for grain shipments. Famine. Then, from Egypt, we get these inscriptions from Pharaoh Rameses III, describing invasions by mysterious groups coming from the islands and the north. He calls them the Sea Peoples, and he lists their names: Peliset, Cheker, Shekelesh, Denyen, Weshesh. But here's the kicker. We don't know who any of these groups actually were. These aren't names from any language we can identify. It's like if someone described an invasion force as the Blorbians, the Squeegers, and the Flumoxites. Cool story, but who are they? What makes the Sea People so frustrating is that they show up in the records as basically chaos incarnate. They're described as traveling with their families, their possessions, in ox carts and ships, migrating en masse. This wasn't a traditional army on a conquest campaign. This was more like a massive wave of displaced people moving through the eastern Mediterranean, and wherever they went, cities burned. Entire civilizations just stopped functioning. Ugarit, that wealthy trading city I mentioned, gone. Destroyed so thoroughly that it was never rebuilt. Same with dozens of other sites. Palaces were abandoned. Writing systems disappeared. In Greece, the Mycenaean palace system collapsed, and Greece entered what historians call the Greek Dark Ages. They literally forgot how to write for about 400 years. Imagine being so thoroughly wrecked that your entire society forgets literacy. That's not just a bad decade, that's a complete system failure. Here's where it gets really wild, though. And this is the part that keeps historians up at night arguing in academic journals. The Sea Peoples didn't conquer and settle everywhere they went. They didn't establish a big new empire. They just passed through and everything fell apart in their wake. It's like they were a symptom of a much bigger disease, not the disease itself. Think of it this way. Imagine if in our modern world, all the container ships suddenly stopped running. No cargo ships crossing the oceans. Within months, our globalized economy would implode. Countries that depend on imported food would face famine. Industries that rely on specific raw materials from specific places would shut down. The global system would cascade into failure. That's kind of what happened in 1200 BC, but instead of container ships, it was the entire Bronze Age political and economic network that just broke. So who were these Sea Peoples really? Buckle up, because this is where it gets fun. We have theories. Oh boy, do we have theories. Some scholars think they were Greeks, possibly Mycenaeans fleeing their own collapsing civilization. There's linguistic evidence that the Peliset might have become the Philistines, who settled in what's now the Gaza Strip. The Shekelesh might have ended up in Sicily, giving the island its name. The Danaan could be the Danans, another name for Greeks in Homer's epics. But here's the problem with all these identifications. They're educated guesses based on name similarities. It's like trying to solve a 3,000-year-old game of telephone. Was it a single unified group? A bunch of different peoples fleeing their own disasters? Pirates taking advantage of chaos? All of the above? We don't know. And honestly, that makes them even more fascinating. They're basically the Banksy of ancient history. We know they were there, we can see their impact, but their true identity remains a mystery. Now here's something that'll bake your noodle. Some researchers think the Sea Peoples weren't even the main cause of the collapse. They were just one piece of a perfect storm. Let's break down the other factors, because this is where the Bronze Age collapse becomes less mysterious invasion and more everything that could go wrong did go wrong. First, climate change. And yes, I said climate change in 1200 BC. Paleoclimatology studies show that the eastern Mediterranean experienced a severe drought lasting decades right around this time. Crops failed. Civilizations that were already stressed by maintaining complex trade networks suddenly couldn't feed their populations. Famine leads to desperation, and desperation leads to, well, people picking up and moving, or taking what they need from others. Second factor, earthquakes. This region sits on major fault lines, and there's evidence of what geologists call an earthquake storm, a series of major quakes happening close together in time. Cities were literally being shaken apart. Imagine dealing with crop failure, and your palace keeps collapsing. Not a great time. But wait, there's more, because apparently the Bronze Age was determined to go out in the most dramatic way possible. Factor 3. Systems failure. Remember how I said this was a highly interconnected world? Well, that's great when everything's working. But it's terrible when things start breaking down. Let's say the tin supply from Afghanistan gets disrupted because of conflicts in that region. Suddenly, bronze production slows down across the eastern Mediterranean. No bronze means no good weapons, no good tools. Meanwhile, iron is starting to become more common. But the technology to work iron is still new and not widely distributed. You've got technological disruption happening at the worst possible time. Plus, the palace economies of the Bronze Age were super centralized. Everything went through the palace. The palace organized trade, agriculture, manufacturing, everything. So when palaces started failing, entire economic systems failed with them. It would be like if Amazon suddenly disappeared and also your entire government collapsed at the same time. Society would get weird fast. And then factor 4, which sounds almost too convenient, but the evidence supports it: disease, plague. With all these population movements, famines, weakened states, and disrupted sanitation systems, epidemic diseases probably spread like wildfire. We don't have definitive proof of specific plagues, but come on, look at the conditions. Look at history. When you get mass population movement, famine, and societal stress, disease always follows. The Black Death, the Spanish flu, COVID-19, we know how this story goes. And in the Bronze Age, they didn't have antibiotics or modern medicine. An epidemic could have been absolutely devastating, pushing already fragile civilizations past the breaking point. So the Sea Peoples might not have been an invading army at all. They might have been refugees, fleeing their own collapsing homelands, spreading through a region already on the edge of total breakdown, and becoming the final straw that broke civilization's back. Now, if you're anything like me, you're probably thinking this sounds eerily familiar, and you'd be right. The Bronze Age collapse is basically a case study in how interconnected systems can fail spectacularly when multiple stressors hit at once. Climate crisis, check. Political instability, check. Economic disruption, check. Mass migration, check. It's like a checklist of modern anxieties, but from 3,000 years ago. And here's the really interesting part that historians and archaeologists are still debating. Could it happen again? Our modern world is even more interconnected than the Bronze Age was. We depend on global supply chains for everything from food to medicine to the rare earth metals in our phones. If multiple major disruptions hit at once, well, the Bronze Age collapse suggests that even sophisticated, literate, powerful civilizations can unravel pretty quickly. It's not a comforting thought, but it's an important one. Sometimes the center cannot hold and things fall apart. The question is whether we're better prepared than they were, or if we're just as vulnerable in different ways. Let's talk about what happened after the collapse, because that's actually where things get weirdly hopeful. The Bronze Age didn't end with humanity giving up and becoming cave dwellers again. Instead, what emerged from the ashes was different. The palace economies were gone, but smaller, more resilient communities survived and adapted. Iron replaced bronze as the primary metal for tools and weapons, and iron is way more common than tin, so you didn't need those complex long-distance trade routes anymore. Writing didn't disappear everywhere. Egypt kept their hieroglyphs, and in the Levant, the alphabet was invented, or at least refined. Yeah, you read that right. The alphabet. The writing system you're using right now, if you hit that subscribe button, like seriously, you should hit it, emerged from the chaos of the post-collapse world. The Phoenicians took a simple consonantal writing system and spread it across the Mediterranean, eventually evolving into Greek, Latin, and basically every alphabet used in the Western world today. So in a weird way, the collapse forced innovation. When the old systems broke down, people had to get creative. And here's something wild that archaeologists have noticed. The cities that survived the collapse tended to be the ones that were more adaptable, less dependent on a single palace economy, more diversified in their trade and agriculture. It's like evolution, but for civilizations. The rigid, highly centralized palace states couldn't bend, so they broke. The more flexible, diverse communities bent with the chaos and survived. There's probably a lesson in there about resilience and adaptation, but I'll let you draw your own conclusions. The point is, humanity didn't end in 1200 BC. We bounced back. It just took a few centuries of what historians call a dark age, which is a bit unfair because plenty was happening, just not in ways that leave massive archaeological evidence like palaces and monumental inscriptions. So what do we make of all this? The Bronze Age collapse is one of those historical events that's endlessly fascinating because it's complex, mysterious, and deeply human. It wasn't caused by one thing. It wasn't solved by one heroic moment. It was just the intersection of climate, technology, economics, politics, disease, and random chance, all hitting at once in the worst possible way. The Sea Peoples are the face we put on it, the mysterious invaders from the north, but they were probably just one piece of a much bigger puzzle. Maybe they were refugees. Maybe they were opportunistic raiders. Maybe they were different groups in different places, lumped together by confused scribes trying to make sense of chaos. We may never know for sure, and honestly, that's okay. Not every mystery needs to be solved. Some of them can just sit there, reminding us that history is complicated, that civilizations are more fragile than they seem, and that sometimes the world just resets. But here's the thing that really gets me about this whole story. The people living through the Bronze Age collapse didn't know they were living through a civilization-ending event. To them, it was just their lives. Bad harvests one year, earthquakes the next, scary rumors of displaced peoples on the move, trade routes getting dangerous, food getting scarce. They were just trying to survive, day by day, making decisions with incomplete information, doing their best in a world that was falling apart around them. Sound familiar? History doesn't repeat, but it sure does rhyme. And maybe that's the real lesson here. Civilizations rise and fall, trade networks come and go, empires crumble and new ones emerge. But humans, we keep going. We adapt, we rebuild, we tell stories about what happened, and we try to do better next time. Sometimes we succeed, sometimes we don't, but we keep trying. So there you have it, the mystery of 1177 BC and the Sea Peoples, an entire interconnected world system that collapsed in a matter of decades, leaving behind ruins, questions, and eventually new beginnings. If this kind of deep dive into history's biggest mysteries is your jam, you're definitely in the right place here at Mystique History. Hit that subscribe button and drop a comment telling me what historical mystery you want us to tackle next. Ancient aliens, lost civilizations, mysterious disappearances. We're here for all of it. And hey, maybe one day some future archaeologist will dig up the remains of our civilization and wonder what the heck happened to us. Let's at least make sure we leave behind some good stories, yeah? Thanks for watching, and remember, history is way weirder than we think.